Hello again, I am Blunty. Yesterday I made a video about Elon Musk. Well, it was kind of about Elon Musk. I was using Elon Musk as a framing device because he had just come out and told the world that he is autistic, except he used the term Asperger's syndrome. He said he has Asperger's syndrome, which is not the word we tend to use these days. Asperger's is not a diagnostic term anymore. It hasn't been for many years because it's problematic in that Asperger, the guy with the name who we used to use for this, well, he was a Nazi collaborating doctor who experimented on children with what we would now call autism spectrum disorder and sent many of the ones with more severe autism to death camps to be murdered. So we're trying not to use the word Asperger's syndrome as much anymore when we talk about autism spectrum disorder. Diagnostically, it has officially been rolled into what we now call autism spectrum disorder. Asperger's and autism are not different things. They are within the same spectrum of diagnostic terminology these days. So, I don't know. Let's not propagate the name of this vile and hateful man who collaborated with Nazis and killed children. So anyway, one of the comments I got yesterday, one of the more hostile comments, and there were quite a few hostile comments left on yesterday's video from people who clearly didn't watch the video. Either they have an axe to grind or some ignorance in and around autism, or they're just an Elon fanboy and they don't like that I wasn't saying nice things about their cult leader. Whatever the reason, there was a fair bit of hostility. But I know how comments go, and it's very easy for me to just ignore the hostile stuff these days. But there was one of these pointlessly petty, accusatory, hostile comments that does provide a useful framing device for some other stuff about autism that I wanted to talk about. So, despite the fact I would normally ignore this kind of shittiness, I'm going to use it today as a teaching device. Now, I can't and won't speak for all autistic people because it is a spectrum, and like I was talking about in yesterday's video, it's a lived experience, and everyone's lived experience is going to be a bit different. So let's get to Mr. Blonde's comments here. They start, "Spare me your outrage." And this is classic gaslighting, by the way, accusing someone of being outraged. "You've lost control of yourself. You're lost in your own fury and anger. You can't possibly be thinking straight." Well, I wasn't outraged in yesterday's video. I was having quite a calm and deliberate conversation about the issues around this. It was a long way from being outraged, but again, classic gaslighting behavior. Accusing the other person of being wildly out of control. Outraged. So, bullshit right off the bat. But we'll continue. "Never once have you advocated for autism on this channel in all the years you've been around. I'm willing to bet the bank you're not even actually autistic, regardless of if you legitimately believe you are. This honestly feels like opportunism content." There's a lot to unpack in that single first paragraph. Number one, he's right. I've never advocated for autism or autism causes on this channel. I've spoken about it in a couple of videos in passing when the context was appropriate, but in general, and I spoke about this in yesterday's video. So this is another little piece of proof that this person didn't actually watch that video, didn't listen to it, certainly not all the way through, because I spoke about this specifically about how I haven't spoken about autism on this channel. I have spoken about it at great length and frequently for years now on live streams over on Twitch, where we can have a conversation flowing back and forth about it, which I find can be quite constructive and helpful even for a lot of people, either from ignorance or finding common ground. And we spoke about that in yesterday's video as well, the importance of speaking about this stuff. And I spoke in yesterday's video as well about how I think I will probably change that and use this channel a little more often for talking about this stuff as we are today, for example. Number two, just because a person is atypical in some way doesn't mean they have to be an advocate for that. You know, every elderly YouTuber with arthritis doesn't have to be an advocate for arthritis assistance devices to help them open jars and whatnot. Every queer YouTuber doesn't have to be an advocate for human rights in and around queer issues. And I, as a person with autism, am under no obligation to use my platform to be an advocate. So putting the pressure and expectation and demands on someone already dealing with something that's difficult to deal with to be an advocate, to be an example, to be a role model is not only unfair, but stupid and mean. We'll move on. I'm willing to bet the bank you're not even actually autistic. Well, I am. I am under no obligation to prove that to you, but I am. I've been properly, medically diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum disorder. Although, as we started out the video with, when I was diagnosed, it was still called Asperger's, or diagnostically, in the diagnostic guidebooks or whatever, it was still referred to as Asperger's syndrome. But it's not about my belief that I am. I'm not self-diagnosed. Self-diagnosis is potentially problematic, but it is also legitimate. Not everybody has easy, affordable access to an appropriate medical professional to be properly diagnosed. Even if you're in a first world country, it's not always easy. The United States, for example, I've been contacted by a few people after yesterday's video talking about how they think they might have autism and they've been self-diagnosing, but they can't afford to go to a doctor to get properly diagnosed. They don't have the insurance. They don't have the access. Even if someone is self-diagnosed, being shitty and judgy about it is not the appropriate way to respond to that. Helping them is. The last sentence, this honestly feels like opportunism content. Of course it is. Elon Musk, a very, very famous person, said something about autism which opened the door for me to use that as a framing device for a video to talk about autism and the way he talked about it and the way, most autistic people prefer to have the conversation about it, the way it affects me. It was an opportunity to talk about that sort of stuff on a channel where I normally don't talk about that stuff. But Elon Musk being the tech billionaire and my channel being largely about tech and gaming and sort of stuff like that, it is an opportunity. Like Elon is someone appropriate to the people who also watch my content for all the other stuff I do. Tech nerds know who Elon Musk is. I'm a tech nerd. I do a lot of videos about tech nerd stuff. It was an opportunity. Of course it was opportunistic content, you idiot. But let's move on to the next paragraph of the 4 that he wrote me. Being a nerd, in inverted commas, misfit oddball, socially hapless, doesn't make you autistic by default. He's right, it doesn't. Would you like to know why so many autistic people are nerds, misfit, oddballs, and socially hapless? Well, the socially hapless thing is pretty self-explanatory because of the way autism works. Being a nerd comes pretty naturally to a lot of autistic people too, because something that is common, not universal, but very common amongst autistic people is having a special interest. And they love to talk about it because it's something they can focus their entirety of their attention on, exclude everything else that floods them on them. Because autism is, if you will allow me to dumb it all the way down for the purposes of this conversation, it's a lot more complicated than this, but for the purposes of this conversation, this will do. It is an issue with input-output. All right, sensory input and processing that sensory input and then filtering it into an output. Autism messes with that. So stuff that comes naturally to a neurotypical person is a manual, deliberate, effortful thing for a person with autism. And we'll come around to this later as we get to more of these comments. But it's a thing. So having something to focus on, a special interest, is a way to help shut out everything else and just focus on something that you find interesting and fun and engaging. That is something that is extremely important to a lot of people with autism. And it's also something that people struggle to understand because people with autism will often want to engage other people in their special interest. So they'll try and engage you in conversations about this sort of stuff. Like this kid might try and talk to you about dinosaurs, even though you don't care about dinosaurs. This kid will just not stop talking about dinosaurs. You, as a neurotypical person, might find that uncomfortable or annoying, particularly in adults who should know better than to just chatter on and talk all about themselves and their own special thing. And they should know that I'm not interested in this. I've tried to stop the conversation a few times, but this is part of the autistic experience. Wanting to engage with other people. And one of the ways we do that, and I spoke about this in yesterday's video again, is desperately trying to find common ground with people. And in yesterday's video, I used the example of someone's telling a story about something that happened to them. And the autistic person goes, well, I had something like that happen to me. Let me share my story. The other person might not have even finished telling the story yet, and that might put them off. But what's happening there is this, the autistic person might be missing the social cues, or might not be aware enough, or might be overexcited to let that story play out as a normal conversation might happen. They just want to connect. They get excited about, oh, this person has an experience that I share. I can share my experience that's similar to their experience. We can connect over this. We can have some common ground, and I can be treated like a person. So no, being an nerd, being a misfit or an oddball does not automatically mean someone is autistic. But those are very common things for autistic people to be because of the nature of the way we engage with the world. The implication that this person is trying to make is because I am a nerd, I've got, I don't know whether you can see on the camera there, but that shape there, that's a little fake Lego Enterprise thing there. And I've got the, all this nerd stuff. And, I'm a 43-year-old guy and I've got Optimus Prime sitting back there and a shelf full of comic books over there. And I play video games all day long sometimes. I'm under no misconception that I'm a nerd, but I'm not a nerd because I'm autistic. I don't think I'm autistic because I'm a nerd. These things just happen to go hand in hand quite frequently because of the nature of autism. But he continues in this paragraph, I've watched you for years and you don't exhibit any traits of your mannerisms, inflection, fluidity of speech that is indicative of autism, nothing. Judging someone by how they present, especially with autism, is dumb. Because another thing quite a lot of autistic people do is mask. And this is another thing I spoke about in yesterday's video. In fact, it was one of the core points of yesterday's video about masking, about emulating human mode, as Elon put it. And one of my points was how that was phrased and what that means. But masking is something almost every autistic person does to a greater or lesser extent. Some of us are better at than others, but all of us experience a very similar thing from masking. It is performative. And just like an actor performing, it requires energy, concentration, focus, control. It requires active thinking. To a neurotypical person, having a conversation in a coffee shop just happens. It comes naturally. You take your friend or a work colleague or have a meeting in a coffee shop, whatever it is. You sit down, you order your coffee or your tea or, whatever. Just a glass of water for me, thank you. And you have a conversation. For an autistic person, I've had this. A lot of meetings I've had have happened in coffee shops. I've never been the one to suggest it because of the following reasons. A coffee shop is a cacophony for someone with autism. Again, autism is a sensory input, output, and processing thing. So when you are in a location with a lot of sensory input, output, like a cafe, usually a fairly small area, lots of tables and chairs, lots of people, lots of noise. They're normally on busy streets because foot traffic is important to a cafe's business. So there's lots of street noise going by. So when I'm sitting in a cafe, what I'm dealing with for sensory input is the noise of the traffic going by, the people going by, the changes in light as they go by the window, if the sun's coming through that window at any particular time. Maybe it's raining and I hear the noise of the rain outside. I can hear the noise of the cappuccino machines brewing and dripping and tamping of the grounds there and steaming of the milk and tapping of the grounds on the counter and pouring out the milk and, slamming out the air bubbles from the steamed milk and pouring it out and people making their orders and people shouting out names of their order, coffee for a Jill, and the conversation I'm trying to have and other people talking with their own conversations in the background and people scraping chairs across the ground when they're pulling their chair in and out to sit down or get up from their table. There's so much in a cafe that has to be brought in, filtered, just so I can concentrate on a conversation I'm trying to have with a person. And I'm not even going to talk about what happens when the order is taken. You have to decide on your order. You have to look at the person who's asking for your order. You have to explain to them what your order is. And then the order comes. Is it what you wanted? How does it taste? How much sugar do you need to put into this particular coffee? How is it brewed? Is it good coffee? And all of this stuff is an active process for a lot of autistics, certainly for me. This isn't something that just happens. It's not background noise for this situation. And all I'm trying to do in that situation is try to block out as much of that as possible, actively, not passive. It doesn't happen automatically. Actively concentrate, filter, focus in on this person who is trying to talk to me, trying to have a conversation with me, trying to have a back and forth, asking what I think about something, and I'm trying to explain to them what I think about something while dealing with all this other noise. That's what it's like for me just in a coffee shop. And that's on a pretty decent day. If I'm having a bad day, I can't do that. The thought of it sends me into anxiety. Like just describing it to you right now. I feel it right here. Everything's on tense. You probably heard it in the way I was describing it. I started to talk faster and more manic as I was trying to pass out all these different things. And the reason I can pass out all these different things so easily is because I'm always thinking about them when I'm in that situation. I didn't have to think about, what else is going, I'm not a screenwriter sitting here, what else should be going on in a coffee shop? There's a gentleman in a brown coat in the background drinking a latte. And no. So in dealing with all this stuff, I have to mask what I'm doing. Otherwise, the other person gets incredibly distracted, or they think I'm not listening to them. Because in order to filter out all of this stuff, a lot of the time, I will be concentrating very, very hard on the teaspoon in front of me, or on the pattern of foam on the lip of my cup. Anything I can focus on, concentrate almost all of my attention on that to help me not think about everything else that's going on. But I also have to have enough brain space left behind to concentrate on what the person is saying to me and what I need to say back to them. Either what is expected of me to say back to them, if it's small talk sort of stuff. And small talk's another thing that's very, very, very difficult for a lot of autistics. But I think I've made my point. My ability to mask is not indicative of the severity of my experience with autism. Especially not when you're judging that off an edited, performed video on YouTube, you catastrophic nitwit. Of course, I will edit out all of the extremely distracting stuff that may or may not be caused by my experience with autism in that moment. Of course, if I stammer and stutter or fail to read part of my script properly, a script I've written 10 minutes ago, if I'm trying to reread it for a voiceover, because I'm trying to concentrate on the way I am delivering that line, the inflection, the point I'm trying to get across, the tone of voice I should be using, that's enough to throw off my ability to read my own script. A script I wrote myself 10 minutes ago. I know these words. I made up these words. I wrote these words down. They've been processed already. But reading them back can become a very deliberate effort. So when I get it wrong, of course, I leave it out of the videos. But he goes on this point. I mean, you bring up your inability to make eye contact, yet there are numerous videos from years past in which you're interacting with other people in person, deadlocked in eye contact. No, I'm not. I mean, yes, there are videos that look like I'm deadlocked in eye contact, but I'm not. One of the masking things that's easiest to do for many autistic people, and again, this is a spectrum. Some people with autism have a very tough time in doing this. Some people find it relatively easy. Most of us find it, again, a deliberate effort we have to do in order to help engage with other people, to accommodate the expectations of other people. When you're talking to someone, eye contact is expected because it proves you are listening to them. You are focused on them. You are concentrating on them and what they are saying. It is a societal expectation, something we've been expected passively. We only notice it when it doesn't happen, or at least neurotypical people only notice when it doesn't happen. It's the other way around for autistics. We notice eye contact when it happens. So, one of the masking techniques that we use to pass as normal, so it doesn't become an issue, so we don't make the other person feel uncomfortable, to accommodate that other person, is we fake eye contact. With me, I will often look at their mouth. And I do that because it helps me focus on what they're saying, because I'm listening to what they're saying, but it's linked to the motion of their mouth. Those two things together help me concentrate on what that person is saying, especially in noisy environments like a coffee shop, for example. Failing that, if I'm having a better day, I will pick another feature. Corner of their eyebrow, for example. Or in women, very often with groomed eyebrows, I will concentrate on how that eyebrow is groomed. Or I will look them in the corner of their eye, or at the tip of their nose, or perhaps their ear. If we're not sort of sitting face to face, if I'm looking across to them, quite often the ear is a useful place to look. I'm not actually making eye contact, but it's good enough to present the message that I am listening to them. But the problem with that is I would rather be looking down. I would rather be concentrating on my spoon or that speck of foam on the corner of my mug in the coffee shop, because that makes it easier still to block out everything else. If I'm looking up at them, I'm also seeing everything that's going on behind them and around them. And that makes it even harder to filter out what they're actually saying. So in my efforts to accommodate the expectation that eye contact means you are paying attention to someone and what they're saying and you care about what they're saying, I am making my life more difficult. I am making my experience of the conversation more difficult to accommodate that other person. That is what masking is, and that is why it is so exhausting, because it requires extra effort to filter, to actually be engaged in what the person is saying and not everything else, or trying to filter out everything else. So when you say you're clearly not autistic because it looks like you're making eye contact with this person in this video, again, pre-recorded video, again, performative. When I'm doing an interview with somebody, when I'm doing an interview with somebody, it is a performance. It is a societal structure. Interviews are not conversations over coffee. Interviews are structured, question, answer on specific topics in specific ways, and they have a specific flow. There is a skill to doing an interview in the proper way. Their last paragraph reads, "So that's what's offensive to me. Faux autistics lecturing on the state of autism in society." So again, he reinforces his own diagnostic decision that I'm not really autistic because my YouTube videos don't make it seem that way. Secondly, throwing shade at those people who do self-diagnose, which again can be problematic, but it can also be helpful. It's a very muddy ground on that. Something which I can tell by the way this person wrote these comments, they are not qualified to talk about. Secondly, they are right. People without knowledge, without understanding, wisdom, knowledge and wisdom, two different things. Without understanding, wisdom and knowledge of autism, how it works, how it affects people, especially from a first-person perspective, shouldn't be out there lecturing other people. Like you, Mr. Blonde. You are obviously ignorant about this sort of stuff. You're not pretending to be faux autistic or whatever you want to call it, but you're still doing what you claim to hate, what you think is offensive. You are here trying to lecture me about what autism is, how it should be presented, and how people with autism should act to fit within your expectations. You are the issue you are complaining about. Ignorant people speaking out in ignorance and making absolute fools of themselves and making things worse for other people. That's what you did, not me. I am speaking from years of personal experience and properly medically diagnosed, and engaging with other people in the autistic community about this sort of stuff, and talking to my friends about how it affects them and explaining to them what my behavior means. So, Mr. Blonde, it's time for you to STFU and speak to some people about their experiences. There is plenty of it out there, I promise you, not just my content. So thank you very much for watching. I am Blunty. I will catch you next time. Undoubtedly, I will talk about this again in the future because I have so much more I can talk about when it comes to this sort of stuff. Because, speaking about special interests, learning about my own autism is one of them.